Okay, so I did not do my job this week. I did not put together a real YouTube video that would be helpful for you in learning about the area. So I'm sorry about that. Um, Last week of summer, kids are going back to school next week. I feel like I'm just hanging in there. So today what I'm doing instead is story time to just kind of talk about a couple different real estate things in the last week that you might find interesting, maybe. I'm sitting literally on a pile of rocks behind my house, pretty far away from my house, hoping that the kids don't find me. So yeah, so in the last week, the two kind of interesting things I thought were worth sharing about were, the first one was I showed a manufactured home that was on 5 acres and it was flat, but yeah, the listing agent said, oh, this manufactured home is, yeah, it'll go conventional. And the reason we want to know that is because for FHA or VA financing, appraisers are a lot pickier than for conventional loans, because with conventional loans, you're putting down more money and the appraisers aren't going to call out like peeling paint or like flooring issues as much. She's like, oh, it'll go conventional. It just needs some new flooring and some new subfloor, but that's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. So we drive out and we go take a look at it. And I just feel like, I don't even know if that listing agent had been to the property. Like, that's my first question. It's like, have you actually seen it? Because she did give me the courtesy of letting me know that it smelled like a bunch of like really wet, big dogs in there. Like, she prepped me on that so I could prep the buyer that when we walk in that door, it is going to smell like 10 wet dogs who need a bath desperately. So I appreciated that heads up because, you know, it's just never pleasant to be hit by that smell, right? So we knew about that going in. And my buyer is like pretty confident, like, oh, my kids do flooring and like that's not a huge deal. But it was not just the lack of flooring in places. It was that like the flooring is like, it has rotted. And so then the seller had like picked up the flooring somehow. Maybe it was like carpet in areas. I can't honestly really remember. And then put down sheets of plywood underneath, like not even in a way that like made it consistently level. So it was really bad. And I think that, and just like really so much deferred maintenance, that it was a huge project. And frankly, I think that the thing should have just been taken down. Like, it was a manufactured home. I think it was like put there in the 80s, and oh, the water heater in the closet in the master was leaking, and there's like visible like wet marks all over the floor. So there, I don't know, if I have a buyer who's like super confident and they've got the cash and they know that they can do it, then I feel comfortable writing offers on properties that need that much work. But in this scenario, for this buyer, it was going to be a huge risk to buy a property that was in that kind of condition, because you just don't know what you're going to find. Like, okay, so you have an inspection done, but inspectors are not like pulling up the flooring to look at what's going on with the foundation system. And inspectors are not going to like find the rot that's like in the walls that you can't see during the inspection. So that was my concern. It's like, I just feel like there's way too many unknowns that once you, like, even if we can like get through inspection and negotiate getting that water heater replaced and do all these other things, once you have someone in here actually fixing the property for you, like, I'm worried it's going to be a can of worms that you open up the wall and then you find something else. And also when we were outside, we could see visible rot at like the base of the siding, and that was a huge concern. Like, it just seems like this thing is falling apart. So my buyer, if she was going to offer on it, she was going to go like over $100,000 low. But frankly, we are just now committing to looking at manufactured homes on property a little bit further out so that she can kind of get what she wants without it being so much of a project. So if you are out there looking, and if you are looking for a project, let's have a conversation first about what your level of like, of your threshold of risk is, because that's going to matter. And like, okay, you buy the house, what's your contingency? Like, if you are doing these updates and it goes $20,000 over budget, are you okay with that? If it goes $50,000, are you okay with that? What if it goes $100,000? Are you okay with that? Because yeah, some of these houses that need work, like on the outside, it looks like, oh, it's just, cosmetic, but then you open up a wall or you get into the systems of the house and it turns out that it's structural or there's like major defects. And some of that you can see just when you're touring the property, but really a lot of times it's because, when you have a home inspection done. And so my question then becomes like, do you like this property enough, like $500 enough to have a home inspector go out there and check it out? Because aside from your earnest money, which you can get back if you are bailing because of the inspection, like that's what it's going to cost you to get the inspection done. Okay, so that was the first one. And then the second one I thought that might be interesting to anyone who's looking for land is I showed property, a 10-acre parcel, and it's in a subdivision, but it is in a giant subdivision. So it was like a pre-platted subdivision of, a couple hundred acres, and a lot of these properties are like 10, 15, 20 acre lots. So what I really like about that is that you don't have to worry quite so much about feasibility on if, like we already know that power's to the lot because they put it in at the time of development. Excellent. So there's like not a transformer in, but you can see the power box is available to pull from. And then you also know that there's neighbors who already have wells, so you can call around and kind of figure out like how deep did they have to go to get their well. And I just thought it was a very good case study of like the listing agent and the seller did a good job putting together the listing, because aside from like knowing where the lot lines are, that one was a little tricky, but they attached to the listing the perk test that was done a couple of years ago, so we knew that it was perk approved. In talking to the lender, it sounds like since the perk test is like just over 2 years old, okay, is the lender going to go for that? Because they might want one that's more recent, and then we're negotiating with the seller. Oh, there's a bee on me. The perils of doing this outside. Will the seller pay for a new perk test? Because if it's over 2 years old, maybe the bank kicks it out. And I found out even if they do kick it back out, it's $1,800 to get a new perk test done, which is not the end of the world. And okay, so it was perk approved. They had that information available. They also had a geophysical, I'm gonna look that up, survey done for water, so that they'd already had a well company come out and like identify where they were gonna dig the well, and an estimate that it was gonna be between 300 and 600 feet deep. So we just kind of need to get bids of like, okay, so what's the worst case scenario if they have to dig the well and it is 600 feet deep? What's that going to cost? And then we did have some questions about access easements, because the road, I downloaded an app called Acres, which was kind of cool because it uses GPS and then it like has the overlay of the lot on it. So as we're walking around, like my app was showing me where we were on the lot, and so we could like roughly see the lot lines. That was definitely the room for improvement on that listing. I really appreciate when sellers like have it very clearly marked with surveyor's tape, where the lot lines are. I'm moving away from this bee because it's harassing me. I really appreciate when sellers have lot lines marked so that it's like super easy for buyers to see. One of my biggest pet peeves is when someone is selling a lot that is like all trees, and you get there and like all you can see is the trees. You can't tell like where the lot lines are, where you put your house, what the slope is. Like, give me something to look at. Like, we have no idea where we're looking at. So that app was helpful, but ideally if they had it surveyed, or even just putting up survey tape or pointing out, giving us an idea of where the lot lines are, that's always helpful. What else was it? The questions that we talked about really were the perk test for the well, where you'd put the house. We talked about foundation, whether he'd want to like go down the hill a little bit and do a step foundation, or if he wanted to stay where it's flat and just do a traditional 2-story, and how that impacts cost, because step foundations are more expensive than just putting in a flat foundation system. The listing agent, gosh, people amaze me. The listing agent, she was awesome, but she told me a story about how these sellers of this property had already contracted someone to put up a shop like a year ago or 2 years ago, and they're going to put the shop up, and essentially this guy took like $15,000 and then never got to putting up the shop, and the money's gone. So then we were talking through like the importance of hiring people who are licensed and bonded, because that's happened to my husband and I actually when we built a couple of years ago. The guy who we hired for framing, which he was not licensed and bonded, and we made him get licensed and bonded before we would sign that contract with him. He took a $5,000 deposit from us and then never answered his phone again. So that was super frustrating and it delayed us big time. And we ended up having to sue him to get some of our money back, because obviously you have to then pay your attorney, but I also went after like some damages because he had guaranteed us this one price and he never performed, and then like that threw off our budget. Anyways, it like spirals. Just part of the whole process when you're building. That's not fun. Okay, so we talked about the importance of markers on a lot so you can see what you're looking at. That app is great. If you want to know what that is, just message me and I can send you a link. What else was there? The perk test, and that needs to be done so that you find out what kind of septic system that you're putting in, and like what kind of system, and you can figure out where your drain field is going to go. And banks need to know that because they don't want to lend you money on a lot that you can't have septic, especially if public sewer is not available. And then as we were writing the offer, I was asking a lot of questions to the lender about like, what's the closing timeline like right now for lot loans, and what are the closing costs going to be? So, and honestly, having that lender, like my buyers had already gone through that full approval process, and I was able to share his information with the listing agent, and like, she's good at her job. She called, she was asking questions. So I felt like it was a really good case study collaboration of buying a lot, good marketing, buyers who have their ish together, and like fairly smooth process. So fingers crossed that we get that one all signed around this evening. So there you have it. That's all I've got for you. My 2 little stories from the last week of real estate. Sorry for the very informal video, but it is what it is. Kids are back in school next week, and it'll be super nice to get back into more of a rhythm. We did a lot of trips this summer, saw a lot of family, had a really good time, but I'm like such a creature of habit that I am excited to have, like, every day know what to expect. Well, that's never true. I have 4 kids, so like someone's always sick or has a doctor's appointment. But you know what I mean? It'll be nice to get back into a rhythm for sure. So anyways, if you are interested in talking shop, you want to talk about houses, real estate, prices, what the market's doing, what rates are doing, just give me a call. My contact information is down below in the description, and it's up in the header above. And that's all I have for you today. So have a good one, and I'll be back next week.